On my orders, coalition forces have begun striking selective
$3.5 million.
What difference at this point does circle back?
More than 1,500 unaccompanied minors now in federal custody, hundreds held for 10 days or longer. That's far longer than the legal time frame. And tonight, a first look inside one of the crowded facilities. This facility here in Donna, Texas, seen in a photo taken over the weekend and shared by Democratic Congressman Henry Cuellar. Journalists have not been allowed in. Tonight, the Biden administration still refusing to call this a crisis.
The administration reportedly ignored warning signs that the situation at the border could spiral into a full-blown crisis. As we're getting our first look at overcrowded living conditions inside a child migrant detention facility.
Are you thinking of going to the border?
At some point I will, yes.
Do you want to see firsthand what's going on in those facilities?
I know what's going on in those facilities.
Do you have plans to visit the border?
Not today. But
it's terrible under a regular circumstance, but when you add a pandemic on top of that, those pictures can be disturbing.
First of all, Shannon, I'm offended by that laugh by the vice president. For Americans, for Texans, for those families desperately trying to get here. Yesterday, there was a little girl that drowned in the river. Kamala Harris must think that's amusing to her.
Secretary Alejandro Mayorkas says the Biden administration is putting its foot down when it comes to this growing
dire that even Democrats and even the media mob are starting to speak out. Now, a little late as usual. Look at your screen. Shocking new photos released. You see those photos there? By Democratic Congressman Henry Cuellar, and they're showing appalling conditions at the overcrowded migrant holding centers. As you can see, the Biden administration is now cramming migrants, into cages. That's right, again, with plastic covers. Remember, it was Joe and Barack. They built the cages for kids when Barack Obama was president.
Spanish flu from 1917. But no, I watched him, and I think that he is got to be grossly incompetent for him to say that, because we had the border, and you know that. We had the border in perfect shape. I made deals. I wasn't giving any money to the triangle. I wasn't, the three countries. If you take a look at, and not including Mexico, and with Mexico I was saying tariffs. We're going to tariff if you allow this to happen, and we had it really stopped.
The crisis on our southern border is growing as more and more migrants take advantage of President Biden's, I should say, lax border policy. And members of Congress ventured to the border this weekend to see what exactly is going on firsthand. National correspondent Logan Raddick joins us from Capitol Hill with the latest. Logan?
Bob, Heather, good afternoon. The situation at our southern border is overwhelming. And at the Rio Grande Valley sector in Texas, Border Patrol agents are releasing illegal immigrants into the U.S. because they're running out of room to place them. But these immigrants are also being released without a court date. And even still,
the Rio Grande Valley are letting adult migrants go without even issuing notices to appear. Is the Biden immigration policy just becoming more of like the honor system?
That is an inaccurate depiction of what's happening at the border. So there's no change in policy. The border remains closed.
She said she heard that because of President Biden, she would be welcome.
Mark, I'm almost more shocked that ABC played this. The fact that they're admitting that they wouldn't have come when Trump was president, but they're coming because they think that Biden is welcoming them in.
Chief Skirl of the Border Patrol sector for Del Rio, and he advised me that this morning there was just under 1,000 individuals detained, and of those, about 256 of them were unaccompanied children.
Border Patrol criminal alien encounters for this fiscal year at 4,140. All of fiscal 2020 was just 2,400. That's an enormous surge. How does a small town like yours handle something like that?
Well, I can tell that the people of Del Rio are beginning to get really nervous and scared. I know that today I had a small business owner. She does photography for the community, and she was giving me firsthand experience of migrants asking her for food and shelter, and she was worried that they were going to steal her equipment because we don't know how destitute and desperate these individuals are.
So what is his concern about this being a super spreader event where you've got 400 kids stuffed into a pod built for 260?
These kids are tested. If they need to be quarantined, they are quarantined. We also follow CDC guidelines to ensure that they are kept safe. One of the reasons that it took us some time to have some of these facilities or some of the shelters open to larger groups of kids is because we wanted to follow those CDC guidelines. So we certainly don't see it through that prism. We actually took the steps we did to keep these kids safe.
But where else in the country would it be okay to have 400 people in a space for 260 during the pandemic?
Well, again, Peter, we're closely following the CDC guidelines. That's why we're opening up additional facilities, why they've been at limited capacity in a number of these shelters.
But if I may, I don't know that there are CDC guidelines that say you can be open
For the are you talking about the shelters or are you talking about the Border Patrol?
Border Patrol facility.
Apologies, I was misunderstanding.
Because not only are those facilities have probably double the amount of people they're supposed to have, number one. Number two, look what happened this same weekend. They released about 150 people, families, without even a notice to appear. That is unprecedented. That is just letting people go into the United States without even a notice to appear in an immigration court. I've never seen that before.
Well, children presenting at our border who are fleeing violence, who are fleeing prosecution, who are fleeing terrible situations is not a crisis. We feel that it is our responsibility to humanely approach this circumstance and make sure they are treated and put in conditions that are safe.
You know, from the very start of the Biden administration and when he was campaigning, he said, I'm going to stop building the wall. We are going to, give amnesty to people who are here in the United States illegally or undocumented, a pathway to citizenship, all of these different things that basically said, come on in. We're going to work out a way to get you in. We're going to get a way to get you documented and all of that. Now, of course, as we know, Rita, from the Australian example, this sort of thing always leads to tragedy. When you leave these...
And it stopped it cold. Between that and now we have almost 500 miles of wall up, and they should finish the wall. It'll take them a month. It took me 2.5 years to get it started because they had so many lawsuits by the Democrats, Congress, Nancy Pelosi, crazy Nancy. She's crazy. And I had so many lawsuits, but we won them. And the wall is almost complete. We did almost 500 miles, and it's had a huge impact. And then for him to say, and we have another policy, stay in Mexico. When they come in, we don't let them in our country. They stay in Mexico until they get approved. Let's put it that way. But not too many were getting approved. And you think it's bad now? Wait till you see what happens in the months to come. Wait till you see what's going to happen during the summer. You'll have numbers like you've never seen before. They already say it's the worst in 20 years.
Another mass shooting, the second in less than a week. This time at a supermarket in Boulder, Colorado, where a gunman killed 10 people, including an 11-year veteran police officer.
About 5 feet into an aisle, heard one loud bang. Thought maybe something dropped, some employee dropped something, and then another bang, and saw somebody running towards me with a terrified look on her face, and more bangs.
Of this community go out to the victims of this horrific incident. We know of 10 fatalities at the scene, including one of our Boulder PD officers by the name of Eric Talley. Today, we have one suspect in custody. I want to reassure the community that they are safe.
Multiple calls coming from inside of people that have barricaded themselves inside. Super shooter is inside. He just shot at us twice.
All right, luckily, Joe Biden is set to hold that official first press conference on Thursday. There'll be a lot of practice this week, so maybe he'll have some answers for us about the border crisis. And I'd like to know if Joe really feels he was blown over by the wind on Friday, but don't hold your breath. Joe is likely going to spend the next several days memorizing prepared lines, just have his little note cards with him. There are no public events over the weekend, no public events today. And while his schedule has yet to be released, don't expect to see much of Joe until Thursday. This is practice week.
While I was gloriously incommunicado, riding horses in the snowy mountains, Princess Diana's second son and his actress wife briefly interrupted their anguished quest for privacy by airing their grubby laundry and laying bare their injured egos before the world's media, unquote. It's good writing, isn't it? Gemma wrote, it struck me how this couple, privileged, tin-eared and much aggrieved, presented as somewhat of a metaphor for many in their generation and those following. A cohort who've been coddled, placated, and told that hurt feelings and differing views are the same as physical violence, who carry a palpable disdain for values and ethics that gave them everything, including the right to wallow in self-pity, who seemingly know the value of and the worth of nothing.
Compared with his gaffes and missteps during the campaign, which were well chronicled, at least with us, are you seeing signs that give you pause on his current health as you compare where he was as to where he is today?
Well, not only as a citizen, but as a doctor, Chris, I've not had the opportunity to see any signs. They've taken him out of public circulation, basically. And that's sometimes one of the first signs of mild cognitive impairment, which we look at for in our patients.
Turn to Joe Biden, who after falling not once, not twice, but 3 times, trying to climb the stairs on Friday, enjoying a restful weekend with 0 public events on Saturday and Sunday, and today, once again, 0 public events. Needless to say, as
he understands what he's saying, because this is worse than Bernie Sanders at its worst point. We never thought this could happen. Bernie Sanders on steroids wouldn't be signing what this guy is saying.
No surprise, the media only focuses on what it wants to focus on. It never has anything to do with real news, by the way. Instead, it's always about a political agenda and, of course, protection. Protection of political classes of people that the media wants and needs on its side.
Speaking of education, Laura, it was just announced that one of your favorites will be the subject of a new children's book. Dr. Fauci, How a Boy from Brooklyn Became America's Doctor, will hit shelves this summer. Despite his heavy media schedule, Dr. Fauci found time to be interviewed repeatedly by the author of this book.
The increased power of the press is so dangerous today because we're very close to one-party control of these institutions. The New York Times and Washington Post are virtually Democratic Party broadsheets. Nearly all television, network and cable is a Democratic Party trumpet.
A Democratic Party trumpet? I mean, what an exaggeration. It's not like they treated his inauguration as the second coming of Christ.
Contrast on display tonight was so stark. I mean, those lights that are just shooting out from the Lincoln Memorial along the reflecting pool, it's like almost extensions of Joe Biden's arms embracing America.
Could pave the way for a 4th COVID vaccine in this country. AstraZeneca says a new study in the U.S. and 2 other countries shows that its vaccine is 79% effective at preventing COVID symptoms. The company says it's 100% effective at stopping severe illness and hospitalization.
Asher also explained that the Institute's work could have been trying to develop a potential coronavirus vaccine as part of a biological warfare program.
The fact that they were funding this type of research from the military, to me, is highly indicative. But, you know, we'll have to see where the proof lies. There's going to be a need for a huge global investigation well beyond the WHO.
It is no surprise the media only focuses on what it wants to focus on. It never has anything to do with real news, by the way. Instead, it's always about a political agenda and, of course, protection. Protection of political classes of people that the media wants and needs on its side. I want you to take a look at what went down in Miami over the weekend. All-out chaos and destruction. Violence, too, by the way. Restaurants and businesses were destroyed. Tables were flipped over. Even what appears to be gunshots in the streets of South Beach. Yet before any of that is mentioned in this Miami Herald article, apparently the big worry is something else. I'm going to quote from that article here. The mayor and public health officials have also expressed concern about the potential spread of COVID-19 among the largely maskless crowds. Miami Beach leaders believe many spring break visitors have been drawn to the city by Florida's lenient coronavirus restrictions. Folks, not only does the media make the whole thing about masks, but they find a way to backhand Florida and its Republican Governor Ron DeSantis, too.
Now, the United Kingdom will not escape the effects of a 3rd wave of the pandemic, given the sharp rise in cases in parts of the European Union. That's the warning from the Prime Minister, Boris Johnson, who said that...
and this could be with us for years, if not decades?
Well, we certainly need to
realize and prepare for the fact that it's not going to be over by summer as we thought, maybe a year ago or half a year ago, and it's probably not going to be over by the end of the year.
Foreign Secretary Dominic Raab's announced sanctions against 4 Chinese officials and a construction company for human rights violations against Uyghur Muslims in China's Xinjiang province. It comes after the EU, the US and Canada announced similar measures, the first imposed against Beijing since Tiananmen Square in 1989.
Prime ministers have come and gone, but the policies broadly stayed the same for decades. Kowtow to China with an eye on its huge, lucrative market. Today, a major shift. Instead of just talking about human rights abuses in China, the UK has done something about them, along with its allies.
Mr. Speaker, in terms of scale, it's the largest mass detention of an ethnic or religious group since the Second World War. We are sending the clearest message to the Chinese government.
A war of words that's turned into a full-blown diplomatic spat between China and the West. In just a few hours this Monday, a volley of sanctions were fired, first by the European Union against China over human rights abuses committed against the Uyghur people.
This package includes 4 individuals and 1 entity from China.
The threats are growing, and the threats are changing. In the biggest review since the Cold War, we now know how the British Armed Forces will take them on.
In defence, it is too tempting to use the shield of sentimentality to protect previous battle-winning but now outdated capabilities.
To release some money, the size of the army will be cut to 72,500 soldiers, the smallest it has been since 1714 and the War of Spanish Succession. The entire fleet of C-130 Hercules aircraft will be retired by 2023, as will 9 Chinook helicopters and 20 Puma helicopters. They won't be replaced. It is bad news for the military's ability to lift equipment and troops around the world.
It's now rained here non-stop for 9 days, and more is expected. 18,000 people have already been evacuated from their homes. That number is expected to treble, with heavy rain forecast to continue for another 4 days.
Droughts, fires and floods. The people of New South Wales and Australia have been hit by more than their fair share of extreme weather, not to mention heartache. Right now, some 18,000 people are out of their homes, forced to evacuate because of what officials are calling a once-in-a-century flooding event. Rescue crews...
After years of testing, all that's left is to prove it can fly on the red planet. What a journey to get to this point for Ingenuity and systems engineers.